The story begins when decades ago, the elite rulers fled to settle on planet Kepler 209 because Earth was no longer habitable due to the pandemic and climate change. 2 generations later, a project called Ulysses was started to find out about the conditions on Earth. The first mission of this project failed, and the crew of the spacecraft went missing shortly after landing. Several years later, the second mission of the Ulysses project was carried out again. The 3 people assigned to carry out this second mission successfully landed in an ocean, but only 2 survived, named Blake and Tucker. Blake began collecting data about the conditions on the surface of the Earth, while Tucker, who had difficulty walking due to an injury to his leg, decided to check the condition of the aircraft's engine. As far as the eye could see, there was only a sandy plain. They specifically aimed to observe fertility on Earth because the conditions on planet Kepler did not allow for reproduction, potentially leading to extinction. The weather suddenly worsened, so Blake decided to return to the aircraft. She asked Tucker to turn on the siren because the fog limited her vision. Suddenly, through her communication device, she heard Tucker screaming. Blake ran to the location of the aircraft. Unfortunately, the aircraft had disappeared. Vaguely, Blake heard Tucker shouting for help from a distance. Blake saw a group of people pulling her aircraft until someone suddenly appeared behind her and knocked her unconscious. Blake and Tucker woke up in a well. The group of people who captured them spoke in a foreign language. Meanwhile, Blake was asked to treat one of the injured people using her medical equipment. Quietly, she took some medical supplies to heal Tucker, who was injured by a stab. Unfortunately, Tucker was not saved in time because he had lost a lot of blood. Before he died, Tucker asked Blake to find the Ulysses 1 project aircraft and send the biometer containing data about the conditions on Earth to planet Kepler. As the day approached evening, the seawater rose and filled the well. Blake was taken out and tied to a boat. The childhood memory of Blake appeared. She remembered the moment when she was informed that her father, who was assigned as a crew member of the first Ulysses project, did not survive on Earth. The next morning, Blake was put back into the well. She briefly saw a group of children carrying her biometer. The biometer contained a report on Blake's observations on Earth regarding fertility and reproduction. She asked one of the children, named Mila, to retrieve the biometer. Suddenly, 3 women were thrown into the well, and then gunshots were heard on the land. It seemed that they were being attacked by another group. Everyone started shooting at each other. Many victims fell. Only the group leader named Narvik survived. She was Mila's mother, whose whereabouts she couldn't find. Blake followed Narvik, who intended to find Mila until they saw Mila being taken away on a boat. Blake prevented Narvik, who was trying to shoot a flare gun at the boat because it was useless. They engaged in a small argument until Blake hit Narvik on the head until she fainted. Blake sneaked onto the boat when they were all distracted by the sound she shot into the sky. At that moment, Blake saw her biometer, but before she could take it, the group had already returned to the boat. She had to hide where the hostages were captured. They were taken to an old and damaged ship. One of the guards, named Pal, saw the necklace that Blake was wearing and brought Blake to the ship's control room to meet the leader of the group. Unexpectedly, it turned out that the leader of the group, named Gibson, was one of the surviving crew members from the first Ulysses project. Blake explained that she still had the biometer that was taken by Gibson's men. They could send the biometer to planet Kepler, but they had to use the transmitter in the first Ulysses aircraft. Gibson told the story of their landing on Earth with her father and another crew member named Stephen. They met a group of survivors they called Muds. Blake's father was very kind to the Muds and promised them a decent life. Gibson and Blake's father were waiting for the next communication window to open to inform planet Kepler. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, the Muds became uncontrollable and killed Blake's father and Stephen. Then the Muds also damaged the first Ulysses aircraft. Gibson survived and formed a colony with the non-rebellious Muds. Gibson even adopted a child from the Muds. They lived near the estuary and built a dam to hold back seawater. Thanks to Blake's father's idea, the dam also functioned as a hydroelectric power plant. Unfortunately, due to the rebellion, the project had to be postponed. Blake was invited to stay in the colony. While taking a shower, Blake experienced menstruation. It was evidence that the environment on Earth still supported the reproductive process. Life in the colony went on as normal. Gibson became a teacher for the children in the colony. Meanwhile, Blake, who was entering a room, met Neil, Gibson's child. Neil showed a small tree by the window. Blake was surprised because trees were supposed to be very rare on Earth. She remembered her father's story of planning to search for the remaining trees on another part of the Earth when he was about to embark on the Ulysses mission. Neil said that he was taught about trees by someone who lived in a room next to the engine room. Neil could only talk to that person through a pipe, but he was forbidden to enter the room. Blake immediately went to the room mentioned by Neil when Gibson caught her. Blake's suspicion was correct. Her father was still alive and locked in that room. Gibson explained that her father was the one leading the Muds rebellion. Blake's father had fallen in love with a woman from the Muds. Blake was disappointed because her father was now giving up so easily, unlike what she knew before. Blake and Gibson planned to try to send a biometer through the weather station at sea. At the same time, Narvik infiltrates the ship. She finds Blake and forces her to find Mila. Unfortunately, Narvik is caught by Pal. Before being caught, Narvik tells Blake that Gibson only captures young girls. Blake begins to realize something strange. In the room, there are only posters about female reproduction on the corners of the walls. Gibson and Blake engage in a small debate. Gibson has a plan to gather young girls to assist in the reproductive process for Kepler when it arrives on Earth, because he believes that the women on Kepler are too old and difficult to become pregnant. Blake disagrees with the plan because she believes that the Muds can survive on Earth without Kepler's help. Suddenly, Pal comes and brings a biometer box. But the box is empty, and Blake assumes that her device fell in the Muds camp. Gibson orders Blake and Pal to return to the camp and find the missing biometer. The next day, Mela manages to escape from her room and hides in Blake's room. Pal, who is suspicious, immediately searches Blake's room. When Pal is about to find Mela, Blake kisses Pal and puts a poison pill into his mouth. The pill instantly kills Pal. Blake and Mela immediately search for the place where Narvik is being held. Narvik, along with other prisoners who have been freed, is immediately asked to release the young girls. Blake goes to her father's room to invite him to leave the ship. From the window of the room, Gibson and his son are seen walking toward the weather station. All this time, Gibson lied, and he has her biometer device to be sent through the weather station. Her father also tells her that Neil is not actually an adopted child, but the result of Blake's father's reproduction with one of the Muds women. That is enough evidence that Kepler can reproduce on Earth. Hearing that, Blake rushes to chase Gibson to stop him. She runs with Narvik and the prisoners while protecting them from the guards. They board a boat to escape, but Blake refuses to board the boat. She walks toward the weather station where Gibson will send the biometer. Blake tells Gibson not to send the biometer. However, Gibson asks Blake to drop her gun. Gibson kills Neil's mother and points the gun at Neil, threatening to kill him too. Blake, who has no choice, complies with Gibson's request. Just before Gibson sends the biometer data, Blake pounces on Gibson into the sea and strangles him to death. Unfortunately, Blake also runs out of breath, and she faints. Suddenly, Narvik swam towards her and saved her into the boat. Blake manages to regain consciousness and sees the prisoners on the boat. Her father is also on the boat. They all manage to escape and return to the camp, and the movie ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because by subscribing you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.